So the first question is, have you ever experienced institutional racism in employment, housing, education, politics? I've definitely experienced institutional racism in education. Going as far back as high school, I went to a predominantly black high school. It was about 70% black, 30% white. But what I found was that all of the advanced classes, AP classes, were all white. And when I initially started school, I felt like I wasn't being challenged in the regular classes. And when I tried to get into the AP classes, they said that I didn't have the prerequisites in middle school to do so. I came from out of state, and so things were a little bit different in the state that I came from as far as what you needed to have, specifically around math. But after explaining that I wasn't being challenged in the current courses and that the AP classes were going to be a better fit for me, we were met, my parents and I were met with pushback that it just wasn't the right situation. Not really giving us a whole lot of explanation other than that I didn't have the prerequisites. So we ended up having to take this all the way up to the principal, and eventually they let me into the classes that were AP classes. I just had to take some additional coursework online, but it was a fight to do, and I see it as a way to being able to isolate and segregate whites from blacks in the quality of education that they received. And that directly sets you up for receiving college credit and how much college is going to cost if you already can knock out some classes. So, I mean, yeah, I think that's a perfect example of just institutional racism that I face in education. So the next question is, what are the consequences of racism for people of color? I think the first word that comes to mind for me is opportunity. And why I say opportunity is because in the example that I had before about how I had to fight to get into AP classes, that sets you up for a different path or trajectory when you're looking at where you're going to college, where you're going to be working, how long it's going to take you to finish college. All those things are affected from as early as high school, and it was really just based on the opportunity of being able to take certain advanced classes. So I think when you have racism that's set in place, it's going to limit people of color on what they can do, where they can find opportunity, and that in turn is going to affect how much money they make. It's going to affect the quality of life that they'll have, and I mean, that lasts for generations and generations because it'll affect what opportunities your kids have. So the next question is being colorblind considered racism? And what I'm assuming by the term colorblind is referring to basically when people say, "Oh, I don't see race." And I think that being colorblind is not necessarily the equivalency to racism, but I think it supports racism. I don't think someone that says they're colorblind is a racist. I think in a lot of ways they're trying to show that they're not racist. But I think what it in turn does is it helps aid racism. If people want to ignore that race is a real thing and that racism really existed and that there's issues that are across the world that are related to race relations, then it allows for history to repeat itself because you won't be able to properly identify these are the signs of racism. It definitely aids the cause, but I think a lot of times when people say that they're colorblind, it's coming from a place of genuine, trying to be genuine and say that I see more of you than your race. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But it probably depends on the person. But I think that's the intent when someone says that. And so because that's the intent, I don't think it's racist, but I think, like I said, I think it contributes to it. So the next question is, how has the overt racism of the 1950s and 1960s, your parents' childhood, shaped your opinions on race relations? I think that's a tough question. I think that it's shaped it in that, one, I can be appreciative of how far we've come since then. I think without that context of knowing how bad it was just a short time ago, we might be even more stressed and more depressed about the current things that are going on right now. But realizing that where we're at now is progress, and it's nowhere near the things that our ancestors, even our parents, had to deal with growing up. I think it helps put things in context, and it gives hope and optimism that this isn't the way that things are always going to be, that progress is being made and progress will continue to be made when it comes to race relations. I think that's really the big takeaway that I get from it. All right, the last question is, will racism ever not be an issue? I think that depends on how you define racism. I think, I think that the way that I learned the definition of racism, it all depended on power and that power dynamic of how a majority group can enable and act power on a minority group of people simply because of their race. And I think if that's the definition, then I do think that there's a way that it won't be an issue. I think if we can strip that power away, that institutional racism that we're talking about, I think that can go away. Now, will we be able to change people's opinions on certain races and influence everyone's opinion on, the fact that we all are equal? No, we're not going to be able to change that. But we can definitely take away the power, and we've already done so, taken away a lot of the power that a majority group of people can have over a minority group of people. As far as the way that people feel about other races, we're never going to change everyone's opinion. It's impossible to do so. But I do have optimism and belief that my children will have more opportunities that are less affected by the color of their skin than even I did. And I know I have with my parents compared to my parents.